smaller group today. So if you all want to, you're welcome to have your camera on. That is completely up to you. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. Oh, Leanne Schumacher cannot hear. So that's interesting. Let's see. Maybe try turning up your audio. I know Sally had to turn up her audio on her actual computer. So Sally, maybe you want to send a message directly to Leanne. Hi, Selma. I'm glad you can hear me. Let's try this. Let's see. Your audio. So I don't know about you all, but I am missing Tangier's coffee this morning. That would have been one of my favorites because they have the best coffee. Hi, Brenda. I'm glad you can hear and see me. Good stuff. All right. And I'm going to type turn up your audio, or try turning up your audio if you can't hear me. If you can hear me, obviously you don't need to know that. And we'll go from there. Got a couple more people coming in. Oh, it looks like Leanne got out and is coming back in. I see Carolyn's joining us. All right. Good morning. Good morning. We are sitting at 41 people and it is 9:02. And so I'm going to go ahead and start talking a little bit. If you can't hear me, well, you can't hear me. So I guess my directions, it wouldn't matter. But, oh, we still got, let's see, we got 42 coming in. All right, well, just going to get started. This is going to be different than we have done in the past. And in the past, we would have a meeting, actually a breakfast usually. And I think we've probably been doing this for 6 or 7 years. We would have a breakfast at Tangier's and we would all enjoy their breakfast and their coffee. And unfortunately, we're sitting here right now and I am in my home office and you are wherever you are. And unfortunately, we can't be together, but we're going to try things a little bit differently this year. I want to say last year we had, I think, 200 people because I invited a bunch of other safety councils. But this year, I'm just going to do these open houses with different councils separately. So hopefully we're able to answer a lot of questions if you have them. So what my plan is today, and I know Sally had put this out there on the invitation, is what my plan is I'm going to just talk for like 15 minutes or so. I have a real short presentation. It is, if you've been through this, which most of the names are really familiar, so you but it's just going to be a real quick refresher. Going to run through, just general requirements, and then we're going to open it up to questions and answers. And I also have Todd Jensen from OSHA. He's on here, and he is going to field any questions or answer. I'm going to give him a chance when I'm done with this part to see if he has anything he wants to add. And then I know there's some new guidance around COVID and recording of COVID cases, so we can talk about that too. But know that Todd from OSHA is here, and we're glad that he's here to listen. And I think this is probably the first class of mine that Todd has been to too, so you guys can encourage him with me. All right. The one thing Sally wanted me to mention before I got started is that this year, just like everything else, is different, right? And so we are not collecting semi-annual reports. So I know you guys, that's just kind of like a side part of OSHA record keeping or PERP record keeping. And no, this year you don't have to turn that into Sally. So don't worry about that one. But of course, you still have to do your OSHA and your PERP log. You still have to, as long as you meet those requirements, post it. Everybody should post it. We'll talk about that. You still have to submit it to OSHA and or PERP. So we'll go through that. That's all the kind of stuff that we're going to talk about. So for those of you that have been here before, you know the spiel and you know me, but in case there's anyone new here, my name is Carrie Gray. I am a safety consultant at the BWC. Obviously, I work with Summit County Safety Council. I have a couple other councils that I work for, and you all lovingly call me the OSHA record keeping geek. All right, so we know that, I'm the weird one that loves to read the Federal Registry when something new comes out and it changes, and, we go from there. So throw that one out there. I've been dealing with record keeping, a little over 20 years or so, even before it became the 300, and did a lot of stuff at GE with record keeping. And it seems like in Canton, in my office, and just from teaching this so much, I get a lot of the record keeping questions, which is awesome because they're different every time. So I like the questions. Let's see. I think that's it for an intro. The other part, I guess, just so you know, because I know I do have quite a few of my public employers on here. Even though I'm going to say OSHA, you know that I am referring to PERP as well. The only two things that I can tell you off the top of my head that are different between PERP and OSHA is in OSHA, you have 7 days to put it on your log, and PERP, you have 6. I don't know why. And then, from this whole COVID thing, OSHA has put out very clear guidance of, how you should determine if a case should go on your log. And PERP, I'm just basically telling folks, hey, go with what OSHA says at this point, because I couldn't find anything, concrete of what PERP has put out there. And so just know that. All right, so going to go ahead and get started. My contact information is on there. Sometimes with record keeping questions, it's better to have a conversation, but sometimes it's better to send me an email. And, really the difference is, do you want some sort of documentation that you can put in your file to say, why you did or didn't do something? And if that's the case, send me an email, because most of the time I'll look up, or I'll pull the reg, or I'll pull the letter of interpretation, or the Q&A or FAQ or whatever. I'll pull that and put that in an email to you, and then, you can include that with your documentation. So that's good. But we're just going to briefly talk about OSHA record keeping. And, we always start with, well, do I have to keep the log? Now, again, most of you all here, we spend a little more time on this, but most of you already know the answers to this. Ultimately, if you had 11 or more employees during the last calendar year, and that's even if they're working from home, if you had those employees that worked for your company, then you're going to have to keep the OSHA log. Now, for the most part, most industries are covered. You're looking at agriculture, manufacturing, construction, utilities, trade, wholesale trade, transportation. There is a list, and I didn't include it in here, but there is a list of folks that have exceptions, and they wouldn't have to keep the log. Now, even if you have an exception, you still have to, answer OSHA's questions. You still have to report if you have a fatality or serious injury. We'll get to that one later. But, for the most part, the folks that are in Safety Council have to keep this log. If not, you've been in my class before and you know that, and, you probably wouldn't have come back to another one. If you did, you just wanted to hear me talk. So that's awesome. All right. So this may look a little bit different. And if you notice, and the only thing that's different about it, honestly, is the fact that it has more information on it. Okay, so may look a little bit different. It has the reporting stuff in there in the bottom, and I'll pull up the sheet itself. But when Sally set out the invitation to this class, this was included in there. All right, so if you don't have that handy, you might want to go back in your deleted or whatever. And yes, Katie, we will have Sally send out the slide deck when we're done. So I'll put that on my notes. But yes, we'll send out the slides. And I probably could send you out an older one too. If you want it, just let me know. That would have a lot more because this one's pretty short, but I'll put that to Sally to send out the slides. So in addition to that, we'll include this one again as well. This is a little different. Normally the sheet that I do only has that circle on there that you're seeing at the bottom. And then it has the stuff about first aid on the back. Well, this one has a little bit more. Like I said, go to your deletes and find that if you need to. And from there, you can see all this information. It has the work-related exceptions on there too, so it's kind of nice. And I got this when I helped teach the OSHA record keeping class that we had offered in December, and I'm offering the full, half day virtual coming up in February. So if you need a lot more after this, that might be a really good place for you. Those of you too that know me know that, I do this, we're going to do this in about 20 minutes or so. I do the 2-hour often for the council. I do a 4-hour. I do a, 8-hour OSHA record keeping. I know that sounds like more fun than you could possibly handle. But, the 4-hour is pretty much what we're going to be doing virtually. And, we try to get as much participation as we can, but, it is a virtual class. So I try to make it fun, but, it is what it is. So that's where this comes from. If we look at this sheet and we're gonna, zoom in on it a little bit, and this is what you're used to seeing. So we have these 5 steps. Did we have the injury? Is it work-related? Is it a new case? Does it meet the general recording criteria? Okay, and then from there you record or don't record. This is the same logic. Nothing here has changed. This is what we go through and we talk about every time that we have this class, or every time even anybody calls me. This is what goes through my head is, okay, did we have the injury? Is it work-related? Is it a new case? Does it meet the general recording criteria? So that being said, we're going to start with talking about, is our injury work-related? Okay, so we had the injury. We're looking at this and trying to determine, does something go on our log? So we're going to say, is it work-related? So when we talk about work-related, we're obviously talking about in the work environment. Right now, a little bit unusual, but my work environment is here. Right? So we can have a work environment that can be our home as long as you're working there. And there's some requirements about that, but we're in our work environment. So we're there as a condition of our employment. So, usually when we're sitting at Tangiers, I say, hey, we're working. Nobody came here for free just to listen to me. We're working. Tangiers at that moment was part of your work environment. Well, wherever you're sitting right now, I'm assuming you're getting, some sort of salary to listen to me and, to learn this information and to make sure you're doing right. So if that's the case, you're at work, and that would be work-related. There are exceptions. There are a couple exceptions. Members of the general public, common flus and colds, which doesn't necessarily include COVID. There's like 9 different exceptions, and that is on that handout that we do, that was included with that, and that we'll send out again. So know that if you think something may not be work-related, like, eating or drinking food for personal consumption, then, and you remember all those ones that we talked through. But if you have something, feel free, we can always talk through it too. But this is the way our brains should be going, is through these steps of logic when we're trying to figure out if something work-related. So we had the injury, and I told you I was going to go fast, right? We had the injury, we determine it's work-related. And I guess the part to keep in mind here is if we say it's not work-related, then we go to the left there from number 2, and we do not record the injury or illness. Okay, so at that point, if it's not work-related, we're done. It doesn't matter the rest of it that happens. And, a lot of times folks get really caught up between, well, then who pays for it? Well, OSHA doesn't really care. Okay, who pays for it is a workers' comp issue, and that's not what we're talking about. We're only talking about what goes on your OSHA log. Okay, so just keep that in mind. If it is not work-related, we're done. We go on to the next one, so, no worries. All right, so if we say it is work-related, we go on to, is it a new case? Okay, and is it a new case basically means that, I got people that are still jumping in. Oh, too far. Is it a new case? Basically, it means that you have no previous recordable injury or illness, same body type, same type of injury, or it was completely recovered. So do you have something, say, somebody hurt their knee back in 2019 and it wasn't completely healed, and then same knee, same injury to the knee, they have happen again, just aggravated from work, then that could be an old case and you could tie it back to the old log itself. Okay, and this part too is a part to think about. Okay, we just crossed from 2020 to 2021. All right, so if we have a case that happened in 2020, we're going to keep all of the information from that case in the 2020 log. All right, we're not going to carry over. Say you have somebody that's still on restrictions. You're not going to start a new injury for them and put it on the 2021 log, because then ultimately you're giving yourself 2 injuries and it was only 1. All right, so just kind of keep that in mind. That's kind of where you tie this in here too. But if we go back here, is it a new case? If it's not a new case, we recorded on the previous year injury. So like the one that I said, you're going to put that on the year that it actually happened. If it is a new case though, say it's the other knee. Say, it was a cut and the cut completely healed and you cut the exact same spot again. Well, if it's a new cut, it's a new case, all right, because it had completely healed. So if it is a new case, then we look at, does it meet OSHA's general recording criteria? And what is that general recording criteria, you ask? Most of you already know the answer to this, but in a nutshell, that general recording criteria is a work-related death, a days away from work, job restriction or transfer, medical treatment beyond first aid, loss of consciousness, or significant injury and illness. Okay, and again, I know we're doing this like at 4,000 miles an hour. Okay, so if this is new to you, keep in mind you're probably going to want to take that other class of mine that I mentioned. But for most of you guys, you've been doing this for a while. So when you close your eyes, you should see this sheet, all right, some form of this in your head. That's what I see in my head. Maybe you don't, maybe it's just me. But if you see this, we're going through these steps. The old one that I usually gave you would have a circle at the bottom, and in that circle would be these things. So, you know, death, days away, restriction, medical treatment, and then you have those others. All right, so talk through those briefly. Days away, a days away is not like in workers' comp, right? We're talking OSHA here. If you have one or more day off as prescribed by the doctor, regardless, then you're going to have to count that. Okay, and I get a lot of questions about this. Well, this happened, this happened, this happened, and I'll always entertain this question. So feel free to always ask those, but just know that, you know, this is one or more day off. It's going to be a days away case. Okay, and when we think about our log, if you close your eyes and think about the log itself, when we remember the columns A, B, C, D, E, well, G, okay, H is the days away column. And that's where we're going to record this, and we're going to mark an X, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. All right, but again, this is probably old news, just a refresher to most of you. We don't include the day of the injury or illness. We know that. So they get hurt today, they go to the doctor today, they're off starting tomorrow, and the doctor says they can come back on Monday, then we're not going to count today, which is Thursday, but we're going to count Friday, we're going to count Saturday, we're going to count Sunday, and then they're back to work on Monday. So in that case, we have 3 days. Okay, now folks get so upset about the calendar days issue, and I understand that, okay, but in the grand scheme of things, in all reality, once you have a case with days away, you have a case with days away. It doesn't matter how many days. It doesn't make a difference. You know, you can cap it at 180, you see that there. But if you have 1 day or 3 days, you still have a case with days away. All right. And they're still viewed the same when we figure out your injury rates. A case is, once you have 1 day, your damage is done. Okay. I'm not saying you want people to be off for long periods of time. Obviously, don't misunderstand me there. But, you know, do the best you can do to figure out those number of days. But, you know, don't lose sleep over that. Work on preventing the injury so you don't have another case to add on to your log. So that's just my recommendation. The case days away is as recommended by a licensed healthcare professional. Okay, so if I get hurt today and I go to the doctor and he says, you're fine to come back tomorrow, and I say, I don't feel like coming back tomorrow, it's Friday, I'm gonna take the weekend off to recover, well, that's not a days away because the doctor didn't put me off. So that's one of those that you totally have to go by with what the doctor says. Now, if the doctor said I should be off tomorrow and I come back tomorrow, well, then send them back to the doctor and get a release because they obviously can come back tomorrow. So that is my information. Okay, let's talk. So we talked about days away. We didn't talk about death. But we'll grab that one at the end when we talk about reporting to OSHA. So we got days away, we covered, restricted, all right, so same thing, 1 or more days of day restricted work, and you don't include the day of the injury or illness. That 180 cap is a combined number between restricted and lost days, so, you know, keep that in mind when we talk about column K and L, so that's a combined cap at 180. Now, when we talk about restricted, keep in mind that restricted means that they can't do their routine job functions, okay? And routine job functions, we know, is something that you do once a week or more. Okay, so the example that you may remember is if I get a restriction, and that restriction says that I cannot climb ladders. Okay, if it says I can't climb ladders, that is not a restriction that keeps me from doing my routine job functions. It is not something that I do once a week or more. Okay, I basically climb ladders only if I absolutely have to, and that is very seldom. All right, so a lot of times I'll figure out a different way to get up there because I am not a ladder fan. All right, so if my restriction, even from a doctor that says I cannot climb ladders, it's not a restriction, so it wouldn't be a restricted case. So you got to go back to that general recording criteria and determine, okay, did anything else happen that's going to make this a recordable case? All right, now, if, say, I were to give that restriction to somebody in maintenance, right? Or even a lot of you out there, if you climb ladders once a week or more, then it's a restriction. And so that's up to you to determine. You have, some leeway. It doesn't matter if, say, you climb ladders once a week, but you're not going to do it this week. Well, that doesn't make it not a restriction. That just means you're not doing it this week and you wouldn't have done it this week. So you kind of got to use some good judgment on that one. The thing that I always tell folks, whether it's a restricted case or whether you're trying to determine if something's work related or whatever, the litmus test that I always tell folks is if you were sitting across the desk from OSHA and they said to you, well, why didn't you record this case? You want to have concrete information that you can show them. Okay. I'm not saying always err on the side of caution, but I'm saying you want to have information that, you're going to say, hey, here's exactly why. And this is, and show those details. And then, it is ultimately your judgment. There are a few times, like I said, if the doctor says you have to be off, then you have to count that as a case. But when it comes to something like this, you want to have the information. You are the ultimate decision maker on that one. Okay. So in that handout that was included in the first one, and we'll send that out again, in that handout on the second page, it had a description of what is first aid. Okay, now, always with first aid, remember, keep in mind, the way that OSHA works with this is we don't define medical treatment because medical treatment is big and vast and changes every single day. So OSHA has come up with this all-inclusive list of first aid. And if it's first aid, then it is not a recordable, as long as nothing else happened, right? As long as there's no restriction, as long as there's no days off, as long as there's no loss of consciousness or significant injury or illness, okay? So in all reality, you could have an employee get hurt, go to the doctor, go to the ER, get diagnostic testing like x-rays or MRIs or, eye drops that dilate their pupils to look for some sort of issue or tests or even temporary braces until they get there. That can all happen. And then they get there and the doctor says, oh, no time off, no restrictions, and give no further treatment. If that's the case, then you have something that doesn't go on your log. All right. Now, back to, well, how does that get paid? Well, OSHA doesn't care, right? It gets paid through workers' comp, and that's a different conversation. All right. So medical treatment beyond first aid is our gauge of does it have to go on. Now, when we think about medical treatment, usually what I see the most, what makes something a recordable is one of two things. Okay. One is stitches. Or now we use super glue, right? Medical grade super glue in lieu of stitches, or staples or things like that. So if there are stitches, if there are staples, if there's medical grade super glue, it's going on your log. Okay, if that's the only thing it is, it's going to be the mysterious other that's category in column J. All right, and there's a couple others, so we'll cover those in a minute. But if it's stitches, definitely it's going to be a recordable. Now, the other thing that I see a lot is prescription. If a prescription is given, regardless of why it was given, if a prescription is given, then it's going to be recordable. So if they get a really bad cut and they get a tetanus shot, we see on there the second one, tetanus shot does not make it recordable, but then the doctor gives them antibiotics. Even if they're prophylactic, then that's gonna be a recordable. All right. So any kind of prescription. If you're unsure what a prescription is, Google it, and you're gonna be able to find it. Okay. So you can go that route, or you can always, again, email me and I can do that too. But look it up, see if you can find it. I get at this point a lot of questions. Folks want to know, well, how do I know what treatment happened? All right. And so there you have a couple options. One, if you are the workers' comp person and you have access to our system, you can go in and read all the doctor's notes, and it's going to detail very descriptively what happened. But the other thing is you could always ask the injured worker. You could say, oh, what happened? And they love to tell you those horror stories. It's, oh, they took this big, huge thing and stuck it in my eye, and, ask questions and go through that if you want. So you want to, take care of your employees and check on them and make sure they're doing okay. So there's a good conversation. The other part folks get kind of hinky about, don't worry about HIPAA, okay? Because you are party to the claim, like the injured worker, like workers' comp. and like your third-party administrator and managed care organization. Now, you don't want to get all that information and go tell everybody else. Obviously, there's other issues, but it's not HIPAA. You know, there are some privacy issues there, but you have the right to ask that information and find out. All right. So I know there's always a lot of questions, and we'll just get through these and then see what questions there are at the end. Too far. All right. The others. So let's look at our log here for a second. You can see it, and it's kind of small, but you can see we have, let's see if it lets me, I want to write. I'm just going to use my mouse. Hopefully you can see the mouse there. If we have the fatality, the death, that's going to be marked in column G. If we have days away, it's column H. If we have job restriction or transfers, that's I, and then others. So others is that medical treatment beyond first aid only. And it's also, it's loss of consciousness. So if somebody loses consciousness, that's going to be it. Or if there's a significant injury or illness as diagnosed by a licensed primary health care physician. So that could be certain cancers. That does include like fat fractures. So if you have like a tuft fracture at the end of your finger, that would be an other that you would put in column J. Don't be scared. Don't be afraid of column J. Column J, I would much rather have something in column J than I would I or H, and definitely, I mean, G, that's not even a conversation, right? But you definitely would rather have something in column J. All right, most common mistake that I see on record keeping is if we look at this, all right, and now I can draw. If we look at this, okay, and we look at this whole area right here, we only check how many, all right? And I know you know this answer, and there's a reason I ask you. Say it out loud. Even if I can't hear you, say it out loud. Okay, how many of these do we check? Ever. Only ever is one. All right, I heard you, even though I didn't really hear you. This is so weird. If you've never taught this way, it is so weird because I'm like talking to myself on the computer. All right, so know that. So if I have something that has an other, say they just get a prescription, all right, the only thing that I'm going to check is column J. All right, but if all of a sudden now things are still more complicated and they're continuing to have issues and they go back and then the doctor gives them a restriction, I have to undo column J, and now I'm going to check I. All right, and if say things get worse and they need surgery and they go back and then they get days off, I'm going to undo I and I'm going to check H. So only one of these can be checked, because when we start tallying numbers down here, if we have one here and one here and, you know, one here, then we've given ourselves 3 injuries. And why would you do that, right? You're not going to give yourself 3 injuries. So you're only going to check worst case scenario, worst case, you know, obviously would be death, right? And then days away, then job transfer, and then other. All right. Now, if you have something in I in job transfer, you are going to make sure that you have something in column L. All right. I'm trying to undo some of this so it's not so crazy looking. All right. So if you have something marked in I, you're going to have a number of days in L. If you have something marked in H, you're going to have number of days in K. All right. And so, you know, that's just, again, when I look at a log, the first thing I do is I say, oh, 1, 2, 3, and I'm counting number of cases, and then I'm comparing it to this. Do those numbers match up? Because we should only check one. Then I go through and, you know, make sure that column F is really filled out, because I have had employers get cited because F doesn't include all 3 things it should have. It should have what kind of injury, what part of the body was affected, and what caused the injury, okay, in a nutshell. So if I just say broken finger, I have 2 of the 3. I don't have all 3. So you're going to want to make sure that you get all 3 in there. All right. So let's see if it'll let me go back. Oh, look at all those things on there. All right. I got to remove all those. That's craziness. Annotate, clear, all drawings. Okay. This is new. I'm used to using WebEx. So I do like Zoom. I like that I can merge people and do all kinds of other fun stuff, but it is new for the annotation tool, so bear with me. All right, so I'm going to talk about where to find this stuff. And actually, what I'm going to do is, let me get through this, and then at the end of this, I'm going to come back and I'm going to share my screen and show you how to find this stuff on OSHA's log, so that'll be a little easier. Now, the last couple parts. One is the annual summary. And so we all know we're sitting here, it's January 14th, and by February 1st, we have to make sure that we have the summary posted. Okay, the summary, all the information on the left-hand side, it's going to be filled out if you use the Excel sheet or even the PDF that's on your computer. If you fill that out, then this side is going to be filled out all by itself, the left-hand side there. The right-hand side, you're going to have to fill out your information. You're going to put your establishment and all the information in there. You're going to put your NAICS code. You're going to put your average number of employees and your average hours. And then really, really important, you're going to take this to your boss, unless you're the boss, and you're going to have a conversation with them about hopefully how awesome your year was and how, few injuries you had last year, or whatever that conversation looks like, but you're going to have the highest ranking official at your facility sign that log. I don't plan on owning a company, and if I do, it probably wouldn't have more than 11 people, so I will never sign one of these. Okay, I am not the highest ranking official at a company. It can be them, it can be even their boss above them, whatever that looks like at your company, it's different, but you want it to be a C-suite top decision maker, okay, because OSHA's forcing this conversation here, which I think is so important. You want to have that conversation of, what did our year look like last year? What are we going to look like this year? Hopefully, what are our plans? And hopefully some more buy-in, some more assistance. So this is the first step to that. So this should be posted in a conspicuous location, February 1st through April 30th. Now, right now, if you're sitting there and all your employees are sitting at home, you may want to post this somewhere and then, send out the information to them as well, just to make sure that everybody gets a hold of that. Typically, I'll see this in a lunchroom. I'll see this on an announcement bulletin board. I'll see this by a time clock. All of those are good places. But you're going to put it up in each one of those places, or in at least one place it's going to be visible. Now, in all reality, can your employees look at this and know what those numbers mean? Probably not. So I like having a conversation of, hey, here's how many injuries we had last year, and here's what it looks like, and here's what we're trying for next year or this year. It's a good conversation. It's a good way to go. So that is the annual summary information. The last two parts that I have on here, the fatality and catastrophe reporting, and then the online submission to OSHA. These are not new. These have been around for quite a while, but just to cover these again. So we talk about fatalities, and all fatalities have to be reported to OSHA within 8 hours. And that's even, if you have something that presents like a heart attack at your workplace, you still want to call OSHA. All right, because you're not 100% sure. When I was at GE, we had something that looked like a heart attack. It ended up being an exposure issue. We had reported it anyways and, dealt with that. But you want to make sure you report those things. And I get a couple calls of those every once in a while. Hey, we had a fatality, not work-related. They had a stroke or they had a heart attack. And, the guidance is still call OSHA for those no matter what. This is what changed back a couple years ago, back in 2015, and it went from, if you had 3 people hospitalized, to now 1. So if you have 1 person get hospitalized for treatment, okay, they get admitted to the hospital, not go to the ER, get admitted for treatment in the hospital, then you have to call OSHA, or you have to contact OSHA. Okay, I keep saying call, you have to contact. If you have an amputation, and all amputations, you have to contact OSHA, and you have 24 hours to do that. Okay, and same with loss of an eye. And loss of an eye, I see a lot less. They have a lot less of those than amputations or hospitalizations because it's physical. The eyeball's gone, not blindness. It's physically loss of an eye. Okay, so know that those are the things that you have to report to OSHA within 24 hours. Now, when I say report to OSHA, you can call your local office. You can call, and their phone number is available on their website. You can call the 800-321-OSHA, which is in Washington. They are manned 24/7, 365. So I've always said in my classes, if you think about it, call them on Christmas and just tell them Merry Christmas. But I want to see if they're open. That'll give us some insight on that one. But you can always call them. That's an option, or you can do the online reporting. Now, me personally, I don't love the online reporting. I like the online reporting in the fact that you can go on there and see all the fields they're going to ask you, and you can get all of your, information ready and write it all down, and then call OSHA and tell them. I think you can probably show up at OSHA's office and give them the report, but I wouldn't do that now because I know their staffing issues with COVID are different too. So call or report online. That's how you're going to kind of handle those issues. All right. And then our favorite, online reporting. So online reporting, for the most part, anybody, if this applies to you, by March 2nd has to submit information from that summary to OSHA by March 2nd. Okay, and March 2nd, actually I didn't change those dates there, but March 2nd, 2021 would be for the 2020 calendar year, right? Now, if you're PERP, and I know a couple of you on here are, if you're PERP, you don't get till March 2nd. You're going to be submitting this stuff by February 1st to PERP, and it's going to be through the BWC's website on the PERP section, and then you go in and submit the information that would be on your PERP log, which is pretty similar, almost identical. It's just the 300P or the 300AP for the summary. You're going to submit that information online to PERP February 1st. So if you're private, you have until March 2nd. All right. So who has to do that? And any physical location that is 250 people or more has to submit the summary. Okay. And then for most of us out there, we fall in this 20 to 249. Okay. And the 20 to 249 in high risk industries. And if you're not sure of who's in that high risk industry, click on that link when you get this, but pretty much all of manufacturing, all of construction, all of agriculture, all of trade, all of warehousing, a lot of retail, a lot of medical, a lot of people fall into this high risk industries. There's like 66 different categories. Okay. And you're going to submit the information electronically and electronically only. You can't call, you can't just fax them your summary sheet. You have to go into their program. The start of it looks like this, and I don't have a personal business, so I really can't get much further than this, but you click that red launch injury tracking application at the top there. If you have your password and information from the previous year, then enter it and go in and fill out each information or the information for each establishment. You're going to do it for each establishment that has 20 to 249 people, okay, or 250 or above. And you may have multiple establishments, and that's okay. And again, this is not my publics. My publics just submit one thing to PERP. My privates, you're going to have to go through and do this online. Now, I've already worked with one employer, and the question is, well, so-and-so's not here, and I don't have their password, and I can't get in. Well, when you go into this, if you, there's a select here, and you can send an email, okay, to get help, and then they'll answer you back and reset the password or something like that. So I cannot do that. Know that. OSHA hasn't given me permission to change their website yet. We'll work on that one, right, Todd? But just know that you can do that. You can see here, March 2021 is the deadline for electronic submission. It's open now. January 2nd, it was already open, so it's been open now. You can go in and do that. They're asking for your EIN, your employee identification number now. So that was really the only thing that has changed, and that changed last year too. So again, not everybody has to do it. You have to meet their criteria, and there's a link there. This is right off of OSHA's website. So know that that's out there. I swear I said I wouldn't talk very long, and I can just talk forever. So that being said, I'm going to stop here. I do want to show you one thing. I got to stop sharing for a second, and then I'm going to share my screen to show you something. So if you're new to OSHA, come on. I'm going to get back out of that. If you're new, go to OSHA's website right here. This is their website. If you have questions about the coronavirus and recording, then you can go to learn more, and they're going to have a record keeping and reporting enforcement memorandum. Go to that one. Go to the one that is still effective, remains effective. And this will give you the information about, you know, how you determine, I know it's really tiny, don't try to read that right now, but how to determine what happens there, how to determine if it's work related and that sort of thing to record it. And if not, let's go back to, if you're just looking for general record keeping stuff, go to the A to Z index, go to R. There's actually 3 for record keeping. I go to the first record keeping. There's a ton of information in here, including my new favorite, the Q&A search. So if you have a question, go here. Let's say you have a question about something being restricted. You search it and look, there's 107 things, like you really want to read through all those, but there's 107 things that you can go in there and see what other questions folks have asked. This is different than the letters of interpretation. These come back very quickly. I've asked multiple ones of these and gotten responses back pretty quickly. So know that that is there. So with that being said, I'm going to leave this email. If you have questions, you can always email me. Y'all knew I wouldn't be able to talk for 20 minutes. You know me. We have a half-day class coming up in February. Sally will probably include that in the next newsletter. OSHA's Q&A is great. You can call OSHA. And if Todd is out there, Todd, I'm going to let you, if you have anything you want to add to this, feel free to turn your camera on and jump in here and give any information that you have.
Yeah, I just got on here. I had another meeting I had to be on. I apologize. And I turned my video camera on, but I have a Michigan hat on, so I don't want to.
Oh, yeah, leave it off.
Yeah, see, I got my my tiger. Oh, actually, my camera's backwards, but yeah,
I'm Michigan. Leave it off.
I am on here. So if anyone has any OSHA record keeping questions, you can always contact me. My email address, I'll put it in the chat, but it's Jensen, JENSEN .TODD at DOL.gov. So jensen.todd at DOL.gov. The one question that came up last week that we got a lot was if employees get the COVID vaccination and they have a reaction to that and have to be hospitalized, is that recordable? And based on what we've heard from national offices, if they have to get the vaccination as a condition of employment, like I know a lot of nurses, a lot of healthcare professionals are required to get the COVID vaccine. And if the employer is requiring the COVID vaccine and then there's a negative reaction to it and they have to be hospitalized, it is recordable on the 300 logs. So another question that we got is, if somebody has to quarantine for 14 days, is that OSHA recordable? And because a lot of people are teleworking from home right now, and if they're required to be home to quarantine and they're already home, is it recordable as lost time? And we've got a letter of interpretation out on that from a number of years back. And so there's 3 different scenarios. One is, let's say an employee has to be at the factory all the time. Let's say it's a maintenance person that can't telework. They're at the factory all the time, and now they got to quarantine because they got COVID. Okay, they got COVID. Now they got to stay home for 14 days. If they don't normally telework, then that is lost time. Okay. The second scenario is someone's teleworking 2 or 3 days a week and coming into the office for a couple days a week. So they got like a split shift. They're home sometimes and sometimes they're at the factory. And now they got COVID and they got to be home for 2 weeks. You would count lost days as the days that they would normally be at the factory. The days that they're teleworking, those would not be considered lost days. Okay. The third scenario is someone who's teleworking 100% from home and they get COVID and they got to stay home for 2 weeks. Those would not be lost days if they can still do their work at home. And keep in mind, these recordable days from getting COVID, we're assuming that this is work related. All right. So if if the employer determines that the employees got COVID at work, then it is lost time. But if the employer does an investigation and determines this employee did not get COVID at work, then these would not be lost time and restricted and so forth. So I know that's kind of confusing, but it goes back to if an employee reports that they got COVID, they got symptoms, they got to stay home. The employer needs to, number one, determine if that's work related or not. And Carrie touched on some of that during her presentation on how an employer determines if it's work related. If it is work related, then we start going into these scenarios that I'm talking about with telework and everything else to determine a number of lost days. Does that make sense? So I know that
there is a question. What if they are quarantining due to close contact, but they are not ill?
Let me look at my notes here.
Okay, while you're looking that up,
Yep.
Go ahead.
Might have to get back to you on that one.
Okay, no, that's okay, and we can send that out when we send the information out if you don't find it before we're done talking. I did get another question about work from home, and it's if a person working from home trips over a dog and sprains their wrist, is it work related? Okay, so when we look at work related to work from home, you have to be doing work for pay, and you have to be doing an activity that causes the injury. Okay, so if, let's say I'm working from home and I go downstairs to get my printer and I'm bringing up my printer and I trip over my printer cord, say it's dragging, then that's going to be work related. But if I'm working from home and I get up and I go upstairs to let my dog out and I trip over my dog, that is not work related. So it has to be related to the work activity. Now, if you're taking care of dogs, then okay, yeah, that would be like, that's your job. Or you're a dog walker or whatever, then yeah, that's going to be work related. But it has to be related to the work that you're getting paid for, performed for when you're home. Okay, and that hasn't changed. That was out there before all of this. But that was a really good question. Let's see, Brenda, she has more questions. We'll wait to see if Todd can find the question. The last one. Any non-COVID questions? Okay, and feel free, turn your camera on and just let me see your hand. If you want to ask a question, and turn your mic on, and you can ask the question just like we would in a regular class. We don't have to do it all by writing because sometimes that can be long. But yeah, if you find that answer, Todd.
Yeah, actually, I got it. It doesn't matter
okay.
if they're showing symptoms or they're asymptomatic. If they test positive, and then the key word is test positive with a COVID test, and then the employer, through their investigation, determines that they got that at work. It doesn't matter if they're asymptomatic or showing symptoms. If they have to stay home for 14 days, these requirements that I talk about kick in. If they're 100% telework, and then we're talking telework prior to being tested positive, okay? Everything is here is before they were tested positive, because what we don't want to do is say, well, employees all have to report to work. Oh, but if you get a positive test, now we're going to send you home and call it telework, quote unquote, and so we don't have to report it. It's what their job functions were prior to being tested positive. If they were 100% telework and they can still do their jobs at home, then those would not be lost times. If they were 50-50 telework and at the factory, and then they test positive, it's however many days they would normally report to work at the factory or at their job place of employment. Those days are the days that they would count as lost time, and the days that they would normally be teleworking would not be counted as lost time. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they have symptoms or not. Even asymptomatic, if they got to stay home because they tested positive, all or a portion of those days may be lost time.
Okay, what if they don't test positive? What if they're precaution quarantine because of exposure?
Then those do not have to be reported, because you only have to report based on a positive test. So if it's suspected, if you were just around someone in a car going to or at a meeting or something, and you're around someone who tested positive or who had COVID, and as a precaution, you're just taking a time off from work or spending quarantining as a precaution, but you didn't have a positive test, then we don't get involved in that.
Okay. So, and I pulled up the enforcement recording guidelines on that. So there are 3 parts to this. So first, you have to have the positive test. Okay. So without the positive test, we don't go down this rabbit hole. Then it has to be work related. And the rest of this letter here is all about work related. Okay. And this is, like I said, right when you got on OSHA's webpage, if you click that learn more about COVID, you can find your way to this one. Okay. And then the third one is it has to meet the general recording criteria. That could be days away. That could be some sort of treatment. That could be, you know, what it is. But yeah, the first starts with a positive test. So hopefully that answers the one question. What if presumed positive prior to widespread testing? Okay. So the question that we have, Todd, is what if this happened at the beginning of all of this, back in say March or June or whatever, before they could test, and there was no positive test because there was no test?
Boy, I don't know on that one, to tell you the truth.
My folks ask good questions.
I know they do. I know. I tell you, in 10 months, I haven't been asked that question yet. So I'm not gonna give out false information. So what I can do is I'll write that one down and I'll look into that and get back to you guys, because I don't want to give out bad information. I only want to give out information I'm sure of. So the question is,
Good.
if they were presumed positive back in February, March, I'm writing this down. April, because there wasn't a test out.
Yep.
And they took time off, sent home. Is that lost time? Okay. I will find that out and get back with you, Carrie, and then you can get it out to your members.
Awesome. Okay, and then hopefully, I mean, hope you might know something by next week by our regular meeting. So if we do, Roberta, make sure you come to the regular meeting next week, and then we'll give you that answer too, so we can put that out there.
Or if Roberta wants to give me your contact information, I can email her with the answer too. So it's up to her if she wants to put her email in the chat.
All right, awesome. She can do that, or you can email one of us, because Todd, I put your email in the chat as well. Let's see, another question from, let's go back a little bit. All right, another COVID question. COVID, is it work related if they ride to work with an infected coworker and then test positive, but that's their only exposure?
That's another one I'm gonna have to check on. Is the ride to work like a carpool thing, or is it a ride to work like a temp agency busing people to a factory?
A carpool.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Let's see. Maya asked, is establishment defined as a work site or a company within multiple work sites? So establishment is defined as a physical location. It can be complexes or multiple buildings, as long as they're doing the same thing. So if I use the example that coming from General Electric, we obviously have multiple establishments all over the country, right? So if I have an establishment in Austintown and I have an establishment in Circleville, those are different establishments within the same company. However, Niles Mahoning has a big long line of groups it's like a road or the corner of a thing. It's a bunch of buildings, but it's still one establishment because it's a complex, or Neela Park or something like that. So hopefully, Maya, that answers that question. Your company total determines whether you have to keep the log itself. The number in an establishment determines, do you have to report that to OSHA, okay, electronically. So hopefully that defines that question, or helps with that question. And if not, feel free, send me an email. Susan, let's see, when reporting a summary to PERC, do we combine all the establishments into one summary sheet? And Susan, I know you're a county. For everybody that's not a county, all right, yes, you put it all into one. If you are a county for PERC, there could be up to 4 different logs that you submit to PERC. Now, for Summit, it's only going to be 3 because you guys don't have a mental hospital, okay? But I can pull those and send you that. Actually, Susan, you're with a school now, so got me. A school, you're going to submit one. You don't have to report for each physical, or no, she's a city. Good Lord. All right. City, you don't either. City's not the same as a county. You're only going to submit one for the whole city. I don't know what I'm thinking. It is, not being around people, I'm losing my mind here. So deal with me. But yeah, only counties might have more than one. City, schools, townships, everybody else for PERP is only going to have one. Let's see. Hopefully that answers that one. Randy, how do you record an injury that was caused by a personal medical condition? For example, loss of consciousness. Okay. So first we got to go back to our criteria. Did we have the injury? We had the injury. Is it work related? So if I'm sitting here and I say have epilepsy and I have an epileptic seizure and I go down, that loss of consciousness is not going to go on my log. However, if I go down because I am scared of blood or I see blood and it makes me pass out. So somebody gets hurt in the workplace and I see blood and I go down, even though that's still a personal condition, phobias are not an exception. So in that case, I go down, it's going to be recorded as an other. So loss of consciousness goes in the mysterious other. It's in column J. Now back to that epilepsy one. If I have epilepsy and I go down and I hit my head on the desk going down, then that part is going to be recordable. Okay. And unless it has restrictions or lost time, it's going to be a J. All right. It's going to be an other. So hopefully that one answers that question.
And any heart attack has to be, any heart attack has to be reported to OSHA as well.
Heart attack or fatal heart attack?
Heart attack.
Even if they have heart attack and okay, that's
yeah, I'm pretty sure that heart attacks have to be reported. I know we've had a couple of heart attacks come in. Usually it's someone in the restroom or something like that. Sometimes we get heart attacks. Believe it or not, we've had 2 in the last year where they thought it was a heart attack and ended up being electrocutions. So
yeah, absolutely. I had one that was overexposure of carbon monoxide, like high dose, but it was fatal. So that way it was reported. I would have guessed, well, okay. So you have 24 hours to report it, but if they get to the doctor and the doctor says it's not work related, it's because they have congestive heart failure, you still report it?
Let me double check that. Keep going though.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Roberta. Awesome. Roberta gave us our email. So I will give that to you, Todd. I'll put that in the email to you.
Okay.
So you have it. Okay, let's see. What other questions? If a heart attack due to pre-existing condition is not work-related, and that's he's going to get us that answer because I was under the assumption that all fatalities, including heart attacks, should be reported, not all heart attacks. So Todd's going to check on that one for us. Let's see. What other questions? Feel free. I don't know why everybody's so nervous. I have to get on here and talk and show my face. So you're welcome to get on here and show your face unless you have Michigan clothes on, then you can do it. But if you have questions, feel free. If you don't have questions, if you're good and you're like, I'm out of here, I got another meeting, you are free. Don't feel like you have to stick around. I love the questions though. That's the funnest part of teaching this class is because you guys have some of the coolest questions. Let's see, that being said, I got a question the other day and they sent me a snippet of the medical and wanted to know if it was a recordable, and it's all in Dr. Greek. So sometimes you gotta, do some Googling, and 4-1 proline means stitches. That's a type of stitching material. So I learned that one. That's a new one that I didn't know the name of the material that they do stitches with. So that is there. Sally, have you gotten any other questions?
No questions on my end, Carrie.
Okay. I'm going to stop recording and we can kind of hang out and see if other people have questions.